further ado, ladies and gentlemen, this is Dr. Jon Mundy. He's an author, lecturer, the publisher of Miracles magazine, and director of the Miracles Studies program for All Faiths Seminary in my hometown, New York City. He taught courses in philosophy and religion from 1967 to 2008 at the New School University and the State University of New York, specializing in the history of mysticism. The author of 10 books, his newest book is A Course in Mysticism and Miracles. His previous book, Living a Course in Miracles, has become a perennial bestseller and now exists in 8 languages. He has also produced 149 YouTube presentations on A Course in Miracles. Jon met Dr. Helen Schucman, the scribe of A Course in Miracles, in 1973. Helen introduced Jon to the course and served as his counselor until she became ill in 1980. He also appears on occasion as Dr. Baba Jon Mundane, a stand-up philosopher, comedian. And I just really want to take this moment to thank you, Dr. Jon Mundy. I've been delving into A Course in Miracles for the past month or so. And when Kyle presented this opportunity, I really wanted to grab it by the coattails. So thank you for your time and for the, I'm sure, wisdom and humor you're about to share with us.
Good, thank you. I'm going to get the gallery view if I can, so I can see everybody that I'm talking to. Hi. So I think this is very interesting. I was a minister for a long time in addition to being a teacher. Sort of did both all along the way for 40 years. And what you're doing here looks really interesting to me. And that I don't know whether you know how rapidly traditional churches are dying, but they're dying very rapidly. By very rapidly, I mean, I was a Methodist minister. Methodist churches have lost 65% of their members in this past 65 years. So that's 1% per year since the since about 1965 itself, right? And I think one of the primary reasons for that is because people are looking deeper, and dogmas and creeds and laws and rituals and rites and being told what to do and how to see, as opposed to finding out for yourself, is just not working for an awful lot of people. So there's obviously a change that's going on in consciousness. It's a really big change that's going on in consciousness. We see that among other things, and actually what's going on with COVID, because I think it's a sign of it's an ending sign of a new beginning that comes after this, I think. And not only that, but obviously the political unrest and social unrest, but all of this is happening at the same time that so many people are doing what you're kind of stuff that you're doing. And it seems to me that it's interesting. It's young folks. By young folks, I mean Kyle's going to be 33 in 2 days. And do y'all know who Aaron Abke is by chance? Aaron Abke's a teacher, and so Aaron's going to be. I have a Sunday program as well. It's called Sunday with Mundy. I only do it once a month, but I have a guest speaker on with me that I interview with 2 hours. And Aaron's going to be my guest a week from today. That's from noon until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So you could actually join that after this if you wanted to. So Aaron's a very exciting young man. He's 31 years old. And on Friday, I had this really long conversation with another young guy who is 33 years old. There's something about 33. Jesus was crucified at the age of 33, and I had my real awakening in my near-death experience at the age of 33, which prior to that had already been introduced to A Course in Miracles, but it really woke me up to what the Course was saying in terms of, well, the really profound metaphysics of the Course. There's no world, there's no time, there's no body, there's no you. and all the stuff that seems to be obviously real. but there is a you, of course, that transcends the you of the mundane physical world and the body, which actually we could call the Christ, or we could call the Christ mind, which merely means that we're all participants in that same mind. And there's really, I think, a movement toward the realization that there is, well, it's always been there, but even more clear realization that there is just one mind. The foundation that I work with here in New York, which publishes Course of Miracles, not the Course of Miracles, but my magazine, Miracles Magazine, is called the One Mind Foundation. And in terms of the Course in Miracles, which has been my main study, although my whole history has been a study of mysticism. Did my doctoral dissertation was on mystical philosophies, and I've written a couple of books here. Let's see, I'll show you a couple of books on mysticism as how I used to teach classes on mysticism at New School University in New York City, if you're familiar with the New School. And then most recently, it's this book, Mysticism and A Course in Miracles. The thing that's exciting about the Course is that it works. I'm really glad to see, by the way, that you're I love the definition, kind of like your mission statement that you gave a while ago. It sounds very eclectic, like you're not settling on any one particular thing, nor are you preventing that, but that you're really looking in a very broad scope, because it is a broad scope. You know, the more we limit ourselves down to just saying this is it, not that I think the Course in Miracles could be it. You know, you could do the Course and you'd be fine. But I really enjoy comparing the Course with a lot of other philosophies. I mean, that's essentially what I taught. And now as the director of the Miracle Studies program for All Faiths Seminary in New York City, so All Faiths clearly implies that it's all faiths. So the truth is there. It's in all these different places. There's lots of similarities between the Course, for example, and Zen, or Sufism, or any of the mystical branches of any of the different religious traditions. It's really the mystical branches, as opposed to the traditional branches, that becomes the most exciting in terms of our ability to unite ourselves with something which is divine and which transcends this world and all the aspects of it. So I don't have anything particularly planned or in store for you. I mean, like I don't have a topic or a program, but it looks like in terms of what Kyle's doing, that I'm pleased with the fact that you're using a variety of approaches. By that I mean like breath work. You're doing the breath work. I think it's really important to be doing breath work. I think it's really important to be doing physical work, whatever that means. I mean, whether that means yoga or Tai Chi or a combination of all of these things. There seems to be a health consciousness rising amongst the folks that are also doing the spiritual process, because you realize that you don't want to be doing anything that's going to pull the body down. In terms of the Course in Miracles, you're not a body. Sure, it looks like you are. I mean, here we are looking at bodies on screen, right? So we are a body in space-time. But bodies are exceedingly temporal. I mean, out, brief candle, life support player, it struts and frets its hour upon the stage, tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing, and in very short order, 20 years from now, number of us. I would be surprised if I'm still here 20 years from now. Maybe I will, but and healthy, we would hope. But that's nothing. By nothing, I mean 2000 was just the year 2000. That was yesterday, wasn't it? 2000 yesterday. This seems like it was just down the road a little ways, right? Well, that was 20 years ago. And a lot's happened in those 20 years in your life, I'm sure. And a lot's going to be happening in the next 20 years, especially, I think, in terms of the quote, both insanity of this world and our attempts to try to transcend the insanity. By the way, in terms of the Course in Miracles, this is an insane world. It has always been an insane world. And the fact that we're seeing a lot of insanity now doesn't mean that it hasn't always been this way, because actually You wouldn't want to have been around in Germany in the 1930s or the 1940s. You wouldn't want to have been in Rome during the first century or two at the very beginning of that time. You can just go through a lot of epochs and periods that you just would not want to have to live through that. In terms of the course, and most everything I'm going to say is going to be in terms of the course. In terms of the course, but actually not just in terms of the course. In terms of every mystical, esoteric field of study that I know, they're all going to come up and say the same thing, which is that this world is a school. It's the Course in Miracles says it's a classroom. Another book that's important to me now is called A Course of Love that says it's a school. So it's a school, it's a classroom, it's a mental hospital. It's a reformatory. And I'm not kidding about that, because it's really a place where we've come to learn. Really what we're learning is how to wake up. But you can only learn how to wake up if you recognize that you've been sleeping. Right? So we've been sleeping. And we go through these epochs kind of sleeping, but also this is partly technologically what's going on. It's interesting that the COVID comes at the same time that all of a sudden Zoom is so easy for us all to make these connections. I used to be traveling all the time, going to churches. I had 8 lectures set in Florida for March. None of those happened. But immediately everything went here. And I was teaching classes in New York City. I giving lectures called Miracles in Manhattan. Those are on YouTube once a month. And had done that for almost 7 years, just shy of 7 years. And all of a sudden that ended, but then all of a sudden this opened up. And to come to the one in New York City, you had to actually physically go there. You actually had to get into New York City and find the place where I was giving the talk. But now we can sit down. I don't have to leave my office. This is really, really nice. So there's an exciting growth that's going on. It's going to keep going on. It's going to get deeper. And one thing I think we might want to be aware of is that sometimes as we go through a passage into a new level, it's not always easy. It's not always easy in the beginning. For one thing, the old process, the old system is going to resist tremendously what's going on. And so fundamentalism raises its head, traditionalism raises its head, and sticks it out more. We're about to go through, I love studying history, especially the history of mysticism. I'm working on a book on the history of mysticism. Probably never get it done because it's a big project, but anyhow, it's a project. So there's an interesting thing that's going to happen pretty soon that very few people would know about, and that would even take the time to mark it down as a mile point in history. But on January the 3rd, 1521, okay, so that's 500 years ago, right? Martin Luther was excommunicated from the Catholic Church. 500 years ago, exactly. It's coming up in just a couple of months from right now, right? Marks the date that he got kicked out. And it's interesting that he got kicked out because there'd been a lot of other mystics prior to him who were not kicked out. They were crucified. They were burned at the stake. Luther got by with it. Luther got by with it when others couldn't get by with it. And there were 2 reasons that Luther got by with it. One was that the local princes of he was in northern Germany, were sick and tired of the church themselves. And they were tired of being pushed around. The church was the dominant thing. It was more powerful than any country, right? Because they kind of ruled the different countries. If in terms of, it was the Pope that made somebody king, right? So they were the one who was in charge. But they didn't like that. And then there was another and it has to do with technology. A technological thing happened just at that point, which completely changed the world. And the technological thing which happened at that point was the invention of movable type and the printing press. The Chinese had already developed it, but it hadn't been developed in the West yet. I mean, movable type, once we had movable type and a printer, it was interesting that it was a printer, realized that Martin Luther's 95 Theses that he attached to the church door in Wittenberg, all those theses were, they said, hey, folks, why don't we talk about these things? Can we talk about these things? And the church said, no, we're not talking. You're out of here. You know, to hell with you. We're talking? No. We'll tell you what to do. So anyhow, this printer, see, there were no copyright laws back then. There were no, books were written by hand, and they were incredibly valuable pieces, and only the ultimate rich could even have a book, right? All of a sudden it became possible for the less rich, but still rich, to be able to get a hold of something like the Bible, right? And to actually, you couldn't read the Bible prior to that. When the priest told you what the Bible said, you know, you couldn't read it yourself, right? Unless you were a monk or somewhere in a position where you had, and you knew Latin, you had to know Latin. So all of a sudden it comes into where anybody, the purview where anybody can see it. And so Martin Luther says it's another thing that's really what we should be basing our spiritual search on, and that's faith as opposed to law. Right? We'll have faith in these doctrines. I could keep running on like this. It's not hard for me to do, but I feel like I'd like to dialogue with you too a little bit in terms of the amount of time. So anybody got a question or observation you'd like to throw in? Yes, Angela. Go ahead,
yeah, actually, I was really into that.
Okay, well,
so
we don't have to stop it.
What was it about the printing press at the time? Was it so more people could see what he wrote, his 95 Theses?
Yeah, people actually read it.
I mean, they could have seen it handwritten.
Right, but they put it into type. See, the 95 Thesis wasn't a book. The 95 Thesis was a thesis. You know, so it was like a long script of information. But what he says was, look, let's talk about these 95 issues or questions, right? And a lot of people were thinking the same thing that he was thinking. I mean, he wasn't alone in his thinking. And all of a sudden, here's somebody who says what everybody's thinking, not what everybody's thinking, but what an awful lot of people are thinking. They're thinking the same way, but now somebody actually put it in where you could see it. Yeah. You know, where it wasn't just a concept or an idea, it was an idea that you could share. It became the #1 bestseller. It was the first #1 bestseller. And it wasn't long before it wasn't just in German, it was in French and it was in English and it was all over the place. And people were standing up. Now, it took a while. Things were moving much slower back then. I mean, the King James Version of the Bible, for example, that was printed in 1611. So it took a while, right? It took, 90 years to get around to getting it into an English language format where people, and there was another interesting thing that was going on at the same time, and this actually connects to A Course in Miracles, which most folks don't know about, but Shakespeare. Shakespeare was writing at the same, Shakespeare died in 1616. Well, the King James Version of the Bible was printed in 1611, right? So those are they're actually the same language, right? It's this kind of old, you know, English, thou, thems and those and thous and, you know, all that's a ye and stuff like that, those words that we don't use anymore. But Shakespeare really was, he was the first to kind of go in down there, and it would take Freud and Jung many years later to do what Shakespeare was doing, to bring out into consciousness this insanity of the world. I mean, the insanity of what was going on in some of the kings and the queens and the, you know, so, and then to put it on stage where people could see it, and the depth of the psychology of Shakespeare is incredible. I mean, he was exposing the fact that what was really running the show, which Freud and Jung and others were going to come along later and talk about, was the unconscious mind, not the conscious mind that's running the show. It's this insane unconscious mind that's really behind everything. He didn't call it that or name it that, but he exposed that's what was going on. So everything begins to change at that point. And the next thing you know, there wasn't just Lutheran church, there were hundreds of congregations popping up all over Europe, and then there were revolts to that. You know, and so when I mean revolts to that, there were things like the Puritans, for example, thought that the Protestants had gone too far. You know, they were, you know, there was actually a thing called libertarianism, which happened in France during the 17th century, where there was sort of blatant sexuality that got loose, and people were just doing it all over the place. I mean, once they kind of got this, but that went too far. You know, then that got to be insane. You know, that people were hurting each other and things like that. So, but anyhow, it's just fun. And but we are now in a crux. It was interesting. I started teaching at the New School in 1969. It was a wonderful time. It literally, guess what the most popular song in 1969 was? Anybody know?
Strawberry
This is the
Fields.
dawning of the age of Aquarius. A Hair opened on Broadway. The Pill was released in '69. Greenwich Village was the place to be in 1960s and 1970s. Other similar Greenwich Villages and happening in, you know, St. Louis, Chicago, or all over the place. San Francisco in particular, right? Maybe around where you were, I don't know. But we got off on talking about this is what's happening, and you're a part of what's happening. And I'm really happy to see it. I'm really proud of you for seriously engaging in ways that you can expand the mind and consciousness by looking at a variety of, and the breath work I think is very important. Right.
So it's like, so I mean, it's just like the same thing that you with Martin Luther with the you know, the press, you know, and all of a sudden you could get these ideas out, and so now it's 500 years later, and with the invention of the internet, you know, like you said, that's why the churches are kind of passing away, and there's a new, because we have access to information. It's all about, or it's
Right.
a very, very powerful catalyst, I guess, for in the spiritual world to change the access to information.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you.
And the fact that Zoom happens at exactly the same time, this technological, you know, it's not just a phone or something that you can do this. Some of the smaller churches will not survive this COVID thing. I mean, the really smaller churches are not going to survive. The Methodisms, well, you know, Methodist churches started here in the United States, and it's simultaneous with, in the 1770s, with the birth of our nation. And every little town's got a church in it, right? Those are all closing their doors. They can't survive. What would you like to talk about?
That's really fascinating. It's mind-blowing to think of the implications of that. I have a question in regards to, I'm a huge Course in Miracles fan, and I was reading in your bio how you met Helen and she was your counselor. Could you just talk about how that unfolded in your life and like the influence it had on you?
Yeah, well, you know, I think if you pursue something enough, it will pursue you. And what I mean by that is, so I was teaching these courses on mysticism at the New School. I was part of an organization in New York, which is called Spiritual Frontiers, which is kind of like what you're doing, except, well, first of all, Spiritual Frontiers no longer exists, except in a very tiny little way. But it was a big organization. And we were investigating channeled works, plus psychic type stuff, spiritual healing kind of things that were going on, having all these kind of seminars that you had to physically come together to do that. And I wrote a book about that time. My first book was titled Learning to Die. And that was published by Spiritual Frontiers in 1973. And I was asked to be a presenter at their annual conference in Chicago in 1973. Not a featured speaker, but a workshop leader. And the featured speaker, by the way, was Casey, Edgar Casey's son, right? Hugh Lynn Casey. And Helen and Bill, Helen's the scribe of A Course in Miracles. So Helen and Bill Thetford being her boss and really the other element in the course. He's the one that typed it as Helen would read it to him, read her notes to him. He was her boss at Columbia University department. It's no accident, by the way, that this all happened at Columbia University in New York City. The Course in Miracles is very deep psychology. I once said to Ken Wapnick, why do you think we got the Course? Why did it come during the latter quarter of the 20th century? He said he didn't know for sure, but there was something he was sure of. It couldn't have happened until after Freud. It couldn't have happened until after Freud and Jung again and the other depth psychologists, because it wasn't until then that we had a real deep psychology of understanding how this ego thing works. And before we talk about it and stuff, but nobody had gone into the depth that they did in terms of explaining ego defense mechanisms. What are the ego defense mechanisms? How do the ego defense mechanisms work, etc. Of course, talks a lot about that. I seem to be a little bit off your question. I'm not. So Helen and Bill came to this conference and we only lived a few blocks apart in New York City. She was on East 17th Street. I was on West 19th Street in New York City at the time. Right. So here we are living a couple of miles at most across town on the bus, just across town, right? Not even 2 miles of them. So they came to my workshop. And Helen had been channeling the Course in Miracles at that point already actually they were done. She finished it in 72. This is in 73. So they're trying to figure out what they're going to do with it, because it was all there, it all existed. And they didn't tell me about the Course at that point, I think, but I did meet them, and Helen, they said Helen had written an inspirational book. That's, I think, the way they put it, an inspirational book. And here I just got through publishing a book, and I go, oh, isn't that nice? A little old lady wrote an inspirational book. It's probably got some nice prayers in it. It does. So that was our first meeting, and then we didn't actually physically get together again until 2 years. It was April of 1975, when Bill read an article that I wrote that was in the Journal of Transpersonal Psychology, expressing interest in being in contact with people who were working in the fields of psychotherapy and spirituality. And Bill saw my letter and told Helen that he thought it was a call for her to complete the writing of what's called the psychotherapy pamphlet, which came after the course was done. She got a book which was called Psychotherapy Purpose, Process, and Practice. She said, look, this guy, we remember meeting him, he's asking for this material. And so we think you should give it to him. And so Helen called me and invited me to go over to Ken Wapnick's apartment the next Sunday evening, and sat me down, and Helen and Bill and Ken, and there was another guy there, a priest, and she told me about the course and how it came into existence and how it affected the other people who were in the room. Gave me the manuscript of my psychotherapy pamphlet. I remember walking home that night thinking the most important thing which had ever happened to me had just happened, but I didn't know what it was. And it was a while before I really began to understand the course, even though I had a manuscript copy. They made up 300 manuscript copies, which were given out to different people, right? So I had one of those. So we started working with it, and then Helen sort of became my therapist at that point. And there was nothing intentional about it, but I mean, I was still in my 30s at that point, and I was getting in a lot of trouble, primarily in my relationship with women. So there were just a lot of wonderful, beautiful women around, and I pursued, and then I decided, no, that's not right. And next thing I know, I've got a broken heart, or my heart's broken, or somebody else's heart is broken. I just seemed to go through a lot of breaking of hearts during the 30s and the early 40s, and it took me a while to get settled down. I didn't meet my wife till I was 50. So it was an interesting period, but it isn't fun having your heart breaking or breaking other people's. And so Helen became my therapist to really help me deal with my relationships more than anything else. And other things, like my relationship with the church, that was also something that was I felt like I was supposed to be there. I felt like I was called to be a minister. I enjoyed, it's a great job in some ways. I mean, you have to think about this. You do what you're doing right now. I had to deliberately sit down once a week and put my thoughts together in an organized pattern. I could stand up in front of a bunch of people and talk about these things, hopefully providing some inspiration. What a great job. You know? Plus the other part, the main part of the ministry that I really enjoy, just being nice to people. Just being nice to the old ladies. The old ladies love me, and I love the old ladies. Or whoever it was, you know. It's just like, that's an easy job to do. I could tell stories about that. I once remember, one Sunday, there was a line of old ladies at the door, you know, when you go out, shaking hands and saying good morning to you. And this one woman, she was about 3 back, and she was shaking. And I thought, why is Mildred? Mildred wasn't even 5 foot tall, was a little tiny. And then I realized that she was about to get the only overt expression of affection from a man that she was going to get in the course of a week. I was going to hug her and give her a little kiss on the cheek and say, hey, Mildred, how you doing, hon? Etc. That's it. That was it for the display of, you know, from a man. She had 2 grown sons. They didn't treat her that way. You know, so anyhow, you see what I'm saying. Enough of that. You asked me the question, and you see, just get me started, and I go down. But that's how I met Helen, and it was also decided at that point that Ken and I would continue to get together. And I had some experience at that point in putting together lectures and workshops. I was working for Wainwright House in Rye, New York, with their program as one of the program on their program planning committee. So I started setting up lecture opportunities for Ken Wapnick to talk on the Course in Miracles in New York City, in my church. And then I actually went outside of New York City and bought a place that I was going to turn into a growth center, which I did for a while, but it worked, but it didn't work because the zoning board kind of said, you can't be doing these things here. So I had to do everything I did quietly. Yeah, enough. You ask about Helen. So Helen continued in that format until she became ill in 1980. And then I didn't see her during the last 6 months of her life. Almost nobody saw her during her last 6 months of her life. She shut herself off from the world.
Wow, thank you. That was fascinating. I appreciate that. Yeah. Who else has some questions?
Got it, huh? Bruno, are you asking a question, or is that just playing with your? You're muted. You got to unmute.
Who?
Okay.
Oh,
Can
Bruno.
you hear me?
Yeah, Bruno.
Okay. I heard a lot about the Course in Miracles and all that. It seems to be quite a large book. So could you just give me an overview or a short explanation of what it actually talks about, or what it is? Or because I'm French up here, and I've heard about that book only once in a while on the internet, but I actually don't really know what it's supposed to be.
Okay, real clear. So this is a Course in Miracles, right?
Yeah.
It's a textbook of 669 pages. There's a workbook of 365 lessons. So you do a lesson a day. It takes a minimum of a year to get through the workbook lessons of the course. They're kind of like meditations, like you take this and this is the thought for the day, and then it's some explanation of it, but then you're supposed to kind of hold that thought for the day as you go through the day.
Okay.
And you do it in the morning, you try to do it again before you go to bed at night, and at other times, just to begin, it's working on very slowly helping us to change the way we see. And what it's moving from the ego's projection of the world. So we're seeing everything through. There's an opening line in chapter 21, 3-word sentence that appears twice in the course. It's very, very important. Projection makes perception. Okay, so projection makes perception. The world you see is what you make it, nothing more than that. So everything is based upon judgment. It's the judgment that we're throwing out onto the world, right? And the course is really trying to help us to stop judging the world. I I mean, in a way, it's leaving the world alone, and to do something other than judging the world, which is to just be loving the world. You know, at all times and under all conditions. So you're not bitching and griping and complaining. Something like what's going on with politics right now is something you should be able to look at and to see in a dispassionate kind of way. You should not be allowing this to drive you crazy. Just recognize that this is a part of the normal insanity of the world. It goes through phases of it. But to help us to get unstuck in that sense, you know, to help to remove the ego's investment in whatever. For example, the Course says that anger is never justified. The word is never. It doesn't say sometimes. We'd love it if it said sometimes. If it said sometimes, we could justify the times that we thought it was justified. But it's never just. It's always involves a mistaken perception somehow or another. So the Course really tries to pull everything back to you. Anybody know about the S training program? The Earhart Seminar Training Program became the Landmark. There's a lot of similarities between the Course and what was Landmark or Est, except Est or Landmark wasn't spiritually based. Right? But it's the same. A real important part of the Course is on responsibility, on your being responsible. This is a quote it's from chapter 21, section 2. And I ask everybody that I work with on a regular basis. And I have, by the way, 2 classes on Zoom. If you're interested in maybe look into a class, I'll give you my email at the end. Here's in a way, this is kind of the crux of the Course. I could say the crux of the Course is so many places. It's really all about choice. It's all about choosing. It's about choosing the way that I see and realize that you're a choice every moment of every day, right? And you can go with fear or you can go with love. And that's the broadest sense. So here's the part about responsibility. You say to yourself, I am responsible for what I see. I'm the judge. I decide, I'm responsible for what I see. I decide upon the feelings I experience. I decide upon the feelings I experience. So I can feel fear, I can feel love, I can feel hate, but I'm choosing my feeling right now. You don't think you're in charge of your feelings, but you aren't. You can be in charge of your feelings if you want to let yourself be in charge of them. There's only 2 choices. It's either fear or love. I'm either going for fear in the broad sense. I'm either choosing to be loving or I'm choosing to be fearful. Right? I'm responsible for what I see. Excuse me. I choose the feelings I experience. I decide upon the goals I would achieve. Now, there's only 2 possible goals in the long run. And the only 2 possible goals in the long run, you're either choosing for truth, or you're choosing to be part of an illusion. An illusion is the fantasy world of the ego, right? We're actually at this point, I won't get into politics here, but voting, you have the opportunity. That's what I'll do. Maybe already. You can vote for truth or illusion. That's another way to see it. And it's not the truth is all true, and it's not the illusion is all illusion. But boy, oh boy, is it pretty clear where the illusion is and where some truth is, right? But I'm responsible for what I say. I choose this. And then here's the really big one, the third one. And everything that happens to me, I ask for. And I receive as I have asked. Whoa. I asked for this? I asked for cancer? I asked for heart attack? I asked for divorce? I asked for bankruptcy? Well, you got it. You know, you're more powerful than you think you are. So if you got it, you actually asked for it. So that's kind of the essence of the philosophy. And there are groups and books, hundreds of books on the Course now. I mean, stop.
I think I'm going to get the book. You know if they make it in French?
Yeah. See, where are you? Are you in Montreal?
Yeah, close. Well, Ottawa.
Ottawa, yeah. Because yesterday I have one student who's in Montreal, Patrick, who called me yesterday.
Okay.
curious. There are groups all over there's a place you can go online to look to see where there's a group.
Okay,
that
I'll
you
look
might-
it up. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah. Or
Yeah,
let me know.
Rick. Rick has a question, so I'm going to unmute Rick. Thank you, Bruno.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Dr. Mundy, you early on, you touched a bit on the importance of the number 33 and ego death. Can you expand a bit on that, as well as if the course and your just counseling with Helen had any influence in that?
I don't know about, I'm not quite sure how that would relate, the two parts. You got 33 and then you got Helen. But
I mean,
go ahead.
yeah, if they don't, that's fine, but I didn't know if there was any correlation between that at all.
No, I don't think so. No. The 33, I explained why 33 is. 33 is often a transitional point in life in terms of kind of moving into maybe starting a family, getting settled in a career, all that kind of stuff that's going on in your life at that particular point, or not, right? Or getting caught in a drug, whichever way you want to go. But it's often in the very beginning of a career that's really starting to take root for people, for example, or that you're beginning to be a family man, as Kyle is. He's already a family man, but I mean, it's pretty clear. Right.
What did that look like for you?
At 33?
Yeah.
Well, I told you, at 33, I was teaching at the university. I was working as a minister. I told you my romantic life was chaotic, but fun. Fun in the sense of a lot of adventure, and traveling. Really, I was really doing a lot of traveling at that point. So, and getting deep into yoga. I was really deep. I taught yoga for a number of years at the City University of New York. I still do it. That's something you don't want to. That's a habit.
Mm.
It's a good habit. You want to develop some good habits, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
What kind of yoga?
Just regular hatha yoga.
Okay.
Nothing, and breathe plus breathing, plus pranayama, right? Those two. Yeah.
Cool.
Anybody else?
Thank you, Rick. Oh yeah, Kristen has a question.
Kristen, your name is Quantum.
Yeah, that's the name of my store, so I just have it on here for when we do.
The name is what?
It's the name of my store. My wellness center is Quantum Health and Wellness.
Oh, okay. Where is that located?
We're in Seekonk, Mass.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so when we do our, sometimes we do virtual classes and stuff like that. So I just have my name as Quantum. But I was, you had mentioned that you had a near-death experience, and that was kind of like a catalyst for some of your spiritual growth. And I'm just curious what that experience was like for you and how you feel like it influenced kind of like your spiritual awakening.
Yeah, I hear a rattle in somebody's on the background.
I think I just took care of it. Thank you.
Oh, you just took care. Okay. Okay, so let me answer that. And I would also like to introduce you to, I should have books lying around here. Let me get this, hold on. So this is a little bit heavy duty. So in 1976, I ventured into Mexico along with a friend. The whole Don Juan Carlos Castaneda, anybody, those names mean anybody anymore? Books were very, very popular, and I was into reading all that stuff. And studying mysticism, teaching classes on mysticism, had a few mystical experiences that were kind of nature mysticism, growing up on a farm in Missouri and other things like that, but nothing that was truly, truly transcendental. And of course, at this point, LSD was available. And so I had a friend who was working with a psychotherapist, a doctor, not a psychotherapist, a psychiatrist in Mexico. His name is Dr. Salvador Roquet. And Salvador was a public health doctor in Mexico. And he took medicine to the native peoples up in Oaxaca and Chiapas and places like that. And they were so grateful for what he had brought to them that they gave him some of their medicine that they would use to help people who were particularly dealing with mental illness, right, to stop their insanity. And so he was working with LSD, and he developed this whole approach it actually gave you a death experience. And I'll by the way, let me just mention this book. This book is called LSD and the Mind of the Universe. It just came out last year. The date is 2019 on it, right? This is one of the most incredible books I've read since The Course in Miracles itself, right? It's by a guy named Christopher Beisch. Let me just tell you about Christopher a little bit, then I'll tell you about my experience. I'm not going to avoid it, but the two things are tied together. Christopher Beisch was professor of philosophy and religion at Youngstown University in Youngstown, Ohio. Very respected position. He simply went up to assistant professor, associate professor, full professor, emeritus professor, etc. And he never told anybody during this whole time what he did. Over the course of 20 years, he did 73 LSD sessions by himself, eyes covered. So you can't, if you do that with your eyes open, then you go out. You go out to the nature, you go out to whoever you're with, you go out. If with your eyes are covered, then you go in, right? And with headphones on, right? Well, Salvador had developed the same technique way before Salvador passed away a number of years ago, right? So we went down with a friend. We went to Mexico. We went into the jungles in Chiapas, and that's a whole story. I wrote a book about that too. Really quite an adventure. And without going into more detail, what would happen is we were laying on the bottom of a floor of a hut in the jungles in Chiapas. We were as far away from civilization. There was no electricity. I mean, that anywhere around. Salvador brought with him all these batteries, packs of batteries, because you had headset on, and it's pretty dramatic. So first you start with the LSD, pure Sandoz LSD. That is not street stuff, but medical grade. And you're by yourself, and you start getting really deep into this. Whether any of you have had any experiences with it or not, well, you have or hadn't. It's very difficult to describe because if you've had the experience, you'll understand it. But if you haven't had the experience, it's very difficult to understand. But then, in addition to that, after you're really deep into it and you're really traveling in outer space, I don't know how else to explain it. It's kaleidoscopic dimensions of consciousness and fractals and turning one form into another form, all kinds of stuff. Then you get a shot of ketamine. Now, anybody know what ketamine is? Ashley knows what ketamine is. So ketamine is an anesthetic which knocks out the body. You're dead. I mean, you're gone. I mean, you can't even move a little finger if you wanted to, right? But you're gone. You know, the mind is wide awake. I mean, you're not just wide awake. You are thousands of times more wide awake than you would be when you're most wide awake, right? But you can't move your body. You can't hold on. You cannot hold on to your body. You just can't hold on. So zip, you're out of your body as far as you know. The body's gone. All right, you left it. You're dead. It was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying. I mean, I struggled. I mean, no, this wasn't happening. No, Salvador slipped. He made a mistake. He killed one of us. How is this going to affect my family when they found out that their son had died in the jungles in Chiapas in Mexico with a shaman? There's all these horrible thoughts that would go through. But the main thing is not that it's the ego death. Because by the ego death, I mean you got to let go of you. What I mean by you is who you think you are. So another way that I could express this would be to say that there will be no Jon Mundy in heaven, okay? Because there is no Jon Mundy in heaven. It's already true, right? It's already true. But you're already in heaven. But you don't. This I'm talking coarse, right? But you don't know that because the world in front of us seems so big, and so it's so physical, and we're involved in all the dimensions of it, right? But that's one of the reasons I like starting with your meditation, because you get down, you want to get quiet, so you begin to see that you can do that. You can step outside of the ego realm. Well, I won't keep going with this, but it just let me here's some things the Course says, that like four things that didn't make any sense to me until I had this experience. One, there's no world. I mean, there's no world. I mean, obviously there's a world. Look around. But there's no world, and the world is a part of what we make up the world. Don't take it too low. Don't take it to mean there's no planet Earth, in space-time. But space-time is just a dimension. It's not the dimension. It's just a dimension. There's actually, if you read Becher's book, there's many dimensions of both space and time. We live in linear time. We live in past, present, future. And we're caught in past, present, future. And we got sin in the past, guilt in the present, and fear in the future, which keeps us crazy, those three, right? So there's no world, there's no time. Time is where the story is. Time is where the drama is. Time is where the soap opera is. Time is where the dream is. Time is where it's what seems to be happening. It's like the stage. That's why Shakespeare got this, out, brief candle, life support player that shuts his fire. Again, I mean, Shakespeare understood this, and he could put it into the language that he understood there was no world. There's no world, there's no time. Time is just a dimension. I don't know how else to express that. Right? It's the Course is talking about a relationship which is vertical rather than horizontal. What I mean by vertical rather than horizontal, as it is, we got past, present, future, but our relationship with heaven is here. It's not something that's going to happen someday. It's not in the future. It's in the future, but it's in the Course says heaven is now, is as close to heaven as you can get right now. And why was Eckhart Tolle's book on the power of now so popular? I mean, it's popular because a lot of people realized that he tapped into something that was real. That's really true. I mean, he got that it's now, which is where Zen Buddhism is going, and a lot of others are going. They're just going to now. So there's no world, there's no time. You're not a body. The bodies, as I said earlier, are exceedingly temporal. And then the biggest one, which is not really the biggest one, but it looks kind of like it, is there's no you. There's no you in the individualized sense of, again, space, time, body, that sort of thing. So there is a you, and I already told you who you are, in case you don't remember. You're the Christ. You're the Son of God. You're the daughter of God. That's who you are in truth, right? So what we're trying to do is, Jesus is simply somebody who woke up and remembered that. And so is anybody else that wakes up and kind of, Buddha. What does Buddha say? I'm awake. I'm awake. He wakes up to the reality, right? That's the difference. But there's a lot of awakening going on now. Pietro de Chardin, who was a French Jesuit priest and anthropologist, theologian, he was telling us about this back in the 1950s and the 40s. He saw it. And he also got kicked out. Well, he didn't get kicked out of the church. His books were forbidden to be published. They were not published in his own, could not be published during his lifetime. They were published after, because everybody was really, what did this guy say? If you want to have a popular author, just have your books banned by the Catholic Church. So that's kind of how it happened, right? So that was the beginning. Then it's happened a couple of times since then, but without any psychotropics or anything. I had experience in 07 with encephalitis, which I don't remember much about the encephalitis, but I do remember coming back, awakening from it. That was really interesting because I really wasn't back. I was back, but it was like a baby. It was like being a baby. Couldn't talk, didn't want to eat, etc. I won't keep going off, but anyhow, that was just the first week. But one of the things that Beige just pointed out, I had a fellow on my show recently. You might want to have Peter Panagore. Have you ever heard of Peter Panagore? He's in Massachusetts. No, he's in Maine. Peter Panagore had a near-death experience while he was ice climbing in the Rocky Mountains and froze to death. And his book is titled Heaven is Beautiful. And so what Beige has said, I had a session with Beige just the other day, he said that of all the experiences that he studied outside of these kind of experiences, near-death experiences are the most similar to the same kind of description or the same kind of event that seems to occur. Or again, it can just be a pure mystical experience which doesn't seem to happen for any reason at all. A lot of mystical experiences come as a result of meditation. A lot of mystical experiences come as a result of crash and burn experiences. When people absolutely hit bottom, as often happens, say, with alcoholism or something like that, where you just absolutely crash and burn. Or near death, or by near death, I mean you're in an accident or something like that will happen. Right? Something has to happen to stop the normal thinking process that alters our way of seeing. Let me stop.
That's incredible. Thank you, Kristen, for that question. I don't know if we have any other questions from anybody, or I don't see any.
Okay.
What we do now is Kristen usually closes us out with a nice prayer to all those awakening at this time. That was incredible, John. Thank you so much.
Can I just say a word about if you want to follow up a little bit? Anybody?
Oh yeah, for sure, 100%.
So I publish a magazine called Miracles. I've been doing so for 35 years. It's amazing that we're still in publication. A lot of magazines are dying. And the reason we are still in while others are dying is that we don't rely on advertising for our backing. Oprah's magazine O is going out of publication on the end of December, but it's still going to be available online, but it's not going to be available in print edition, because we rely on donations rather than advertising to be our background from the people who subscribe. So that helps us to actually continue to grow as more people get interested in this. And we're pretty eclectic, even though it's based on A Course in Miracles. Enough. So if you like my magazine, you go to miraclesmagazine.org. You just go to the website, miraclesmagazine.org. And I'm teaching 2 classes right now on the Course in Miracles. One at 8 o'clock on Tuesday evening, one at 1 o'clock on Thursday afternoon. So at least that's the current schedule. I'm not teaching this week because I just completed a series of 6 classes. This is a week off, and then we're going to start another series for just 5 weeks between now and the end of the year. And that's just going to be topical. I'm going to just take different topics and talk about the way the course would approach them. And you can sign up. It's $15 a class, or $10 a class, or $5 a class, or nothing a class. We follow a complete communist system, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. And we have one rule: is no one's turned away who cannot pay. Right? So anybody can be there. But if you can do the 15 a week, do the 15 a week as well. Right? That's enough.
Thank you so much, John. I look forward to doing some of those follow-up classes. That was great. Thank you for everything you're doing for everybody. It's truly incredible. I'm glad we've met.
One more thing, there's also Sunday with Mundy, and next Sunday with Mundy, again, is Aaron Apte. You might want
Awesome. I'll send out the link to our Facebook group.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So now we do a little dedication of merit.
Sure.
All right. Thank you guys so much for participating, and thank you, John, for sharing and sharing your experiences and all of your wisdom with us. I really, really appreciate it. What we do now is we dedicate the merit of this meeting to all of those who are awakening at this precious time. May our efforts to better ourselves help shift planetary consciousness from fear into love. May this energy ripple out into the world and awaken those with closed hearts, illuminate closed minds, and inspire all to live within the presence of compassion and generosity.
Thank you, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of the day and weeks ahead. Take care, everybody. Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
My pleasure.
Thank you, everyone.
Hope to see some of you. By the way, if you contact me, I'll send you a free copy of the magazine.
Awesome. Thank you, John.